kept staring at the ceiling while Clara sat on the edge of the bed. "You're awake," she said. "I've been awake," I said. She sighed. "We need to talk." "We always need to talk," I said. "Just say it." She crossed her arms. "I can't do this anymore." "Do what?" I asked. "This life. This marriage. This baby." My chest tightened. "What about the baby?" She looked away. "It was a mistake." I laughed once. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking," she said. I said, "You don't mean that." "I do," she replied. "It ruined everything." I whispered, "It's our child." "And I never wanted it," she said. Silence filled the room. I said, "I changed jobs for you." She shrugged. "I stopped talking to my parents for you." She said, "I didn't ask you to." "I gave up my pride," I said. She stood. "That's your choice." I asked, "Did you ever love me?" She hesitated. "I tried." "That's not an answer," I said. She grabbed her phone. "I'm tired," she said. I watched her screen light up. A message flashed. "Evan, can't wait to see you tonight." My throat burned. "Who is Evan?" I asked. She froze. I sat across from Lena at the small cafe, staring into a cup I wasn't drinking. "You look awful," she said. "I'm fine," I said. "You always say that," she replied. "When did you last sleep?" "I sleep," I said. She leaned closer. "Don't lie to me." I sighed. "Clara's just stressed." "Stressed people don't disappear," Lena said. "She's busy with work," I said. "Busy enough to miss your calls for days." I said, "Her phone dies." "Every night?" she asked. I shrugged. "I don't want to fight." Lena said, "You're shrinking." "I'm trying to keep us together," I said. "At the cost of yourself." I looked away. "I love her." She said softly, "Love shouldn't hurt like this." I said, "Marriage isn't easy." "Hard is different from lonely," Lena said. I rubbed my face. She wasn't always like this. "When did she change?" Lena asked. "I don't know," I said. "Slowly." "Slowly is how people get trapped," she said. "I'm not trapped," I said. "You sound trapped," she replied. I remembered Clara turning her phone face down. I remembered cancelled dinners. I remembered trips she never explained. Lena said, "Talk to me." "She's distant," I said. "But she's my wife." "That doesn't excuse cruelty," Lena said. "She's not cruel," I snapped. She raised her hands. "I'm worried about you." "I can handle it," I said. "Can you?" she asked. "I've handled worse," I said. She stuttered me. "You're breaking." "I'm bending," I said. "That's not strength," Lena said. "I don't want to lose her," I said. "You're already losing yourself," she replied. I stood. "I should go." She said, "Promise me something." "What?" "Don't lie to yourself," she said. That night, Clara said, "I have a work event." "When?" I asked. "Tomorrow," she said. "Where?" "Out of town." "For how long?" "A few days." I forced a smile. "Okay." She watched me carefully. "You're not upset?" "No," I lied. She said, "Good." I asked, "What kind of event?" She said, "Networking." "With who?" "Clients." "You didn't mention it before," I said. "I forgot," she replied. I nodded. "Right." She turned away. Later, I folded her clothes. "Why are you packing?" she asked. "I want to help," I said. She hesitated. "You don't have to." "I want to," I said. She watched me place each shirt. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm tired," I replied. She zipped the bag. "I'll call." I nodded. She said, "Don't wait up." "I won't," I said. She kissed my cheek. My chest felt empty. I whispered, "Be safe." She paused. "I will." After she left, I sat on the bed. The room felt wrong. My phone buzzed. I didn't look. I heard Lena's voice in my head. I heard my own excuses. I thought about Evan's name. I thought about unanswered calls. I stood and grabbed my keys. I just need answers, I said. I followed her. I sat in the car and stared at the building. Don't do this, I told myself. Just go home, I said. I didn't move. My phone rang. It was Lena. Did you talk to her? She asked. She's leaving, I said. Again. Yes, I said. She was quiet. Are you okay? I don't know, I admitted. Trust your gut, Lena said. My gut hurts, I said. That means something is wrong, she replied. I'm scared, I said. Of what? Of the truth, I said. Silence stretched. You deserve honesty, Lena said. I hung up. I watched Clara's car pull away. My hand shook. I'm not angry, I said. I'm not jealous. I'm just tired of guessing. I followed her car. The road felt endless. Turn back, I whispered. I didn't. I remembered our wedding vows. I remembered promises. I remembered hope. My phone buzzed again. A message from Clara appeared. Reached safely, it said. I laughed softly. You haven't even arrived, I said. My heart raced. This isn't about control, I said. It's about truth. I tightened my grip on the wheel. If I don't follow, I said, I'll never know. I drove on. Streetlights blurred. My thoughts screamed. Please be wrong, I said. Please let me be wrong. But my chest knew better. I whispered, I need to see. I followed the turn. I didn't stop. Fear sat beside me. Hope stayed silent. I'm not chasing her, I said. I'm chasing the truth. The road answered with darkness. I drove faster, heart pounding, knowing whatever I found would change everything forever. I didn't turn back. Not once. I parked across the street and told myself, just look. My phone buzzed. Where are you? Clara texted. Home, I typed, then erased it. I stepped out and whispered, just one look. Music floated from the hall. I said, this isn't a work event. Pink balloons filled the entrance. A woman laughed. She's glowing. Another voice said, she deserves this happiness. I froze. This is a baby shower, I said. I stood behind a pillar and watched. Clara clapped her hands. I'm so excited, she said. My stomach twisted. A woman asked, is Evan coming? Clara smiled. He's parking. I said, Evan. My chest burned. She looks different, someone said. Clara laughed. I finally feel free. Free. I whispered, so I was the cage. A man walked in. That must be him, someone said. Evan kissed Clara's cheek. She said, you're late. He grinned. Worth it. I said, that's him. A guest said, you two are perfect. Evan laughed. We try. Clara touched her stomach. My family is starting right, she said. I swallowed. A woman asked, does he know yet? Clara replied, he doesn't matter. I said, I don't matter. Evan said, the past stays buried. Clara nodded. This baby is ours. Ours. I pressed my hand to my mouth. A guest whispered, who's the father? Clara smiled proudly. Evan. My knees weakened. Evan said, I'm ready to be a dad. Applause filled the room. I said, I was ready too. Clara laughed. This is real love. I remembered sleepless nights. I remembered promises. I said, you called my child a mistake. A woman handed Clara a gift. Open it, she said. Clara beamed. Thank you. Evan wrapped an arm around her. This is our future, he said. I felt hollow. A guest asked, where's the ex? Clara shrugged. Gone. I said, I'm right here. Evan said, some men aren't enough. I said, you took my life. Clara laughed again. I said, she never laughed with me. A woman said, you're glowing. Clara replied, I'm finally loved. I said, then what was I? Evan kissed her forehead. Best decision ever, he said. My hand shook. I stepped forward. Someone gasped. Clara turned. Our eyes met. No words came. I said, say it again. Clara said, you heard me. Say it, I said. She replied, I never loved you like I love Evan. I asked, so I was what? She said, comfort. Years of my life. I asked. She said, a phase. I laughed. Our child. She said, a mistake. Evan stepped closer. I said, don't speak. He smiled. You lost. I said, I gave her everything. Clara said, you gave what I didn't ask for. I asked, did you ever feel guilty? She said, no. I nodded. Music played behind us. Someone cheered. I said, I hope it was worth it. Clara said, it is. I turned away. No one stopped me. I walked outside and heard laughter through the doors. I said, breathe. My hand shook. I said, just breathe. The drive home felt endless. I didn't cry. I couldn't. At home, the silence screamed. I said, hello, to no one. I sat on the floor. My chest tightened. I said, not now. My heart ignored me. I couldn't sleep. I said, stop, to my thoughts. They didn't listen. Days blurred. I stopped answering calls. Lena texted. I didn't reply. I said, I'm fine, to the mirror. The mirror didn't believe me. The panic came at night. I said, I'm dying. My lungs burned. I grabbed my phone. I said, help. The next day, I sat in an office. Dr. Harris said, why are you here? I said, I can't breathe. He said, emotionally or physically? Both, I said. He said, start from the worst part. I said, she said my child was a mistake. He paused. I said, she smiled. He said, how did that make you feel? I said, small. He said, anything else? Disposable, I said. He said, why did you stay? I said, I thought love meant endurance. He said, and now? I said, now I just want quiet. He nodded. He said, do you want revenge? I shook my head. I said, I want the pain to stop. I left the office feeling hollow. I said, I'm still standing. The hallway felt too bright. I said, don't fall. Outside, my phone rang. I answered. Lena said, where have you been? I said, trying to breathe. She said, I'm coming over. I said, no. She said, I'm already outside. I paused. I said, okay. She hugged me. I said, I'm not okay. She said, I know. I said, I don't hate Clara. She said, you don't have to. I said, I feel empty. She said, that means you're alive. I said, I don't want revenge. She said, then don't. I said, I just want sleep. She said, one step at a time. I nodded. That night, I lay in bed. I said, tomorrow. The word felt heavy. I closed my eyes. The pain stayed. But I stayed too. I woke before dawn. I said, still here. My phone buzzed again. A message from Clara appeared. Can we talk? I stared. I said, not yet. I deleted the reply. I said, I choose quiet. The room listened. I showered in silence. I dressed slowly. I said, survive. My reflection looked tired. I said, that's enough. Outside, the city moved. I didn't. I sat on the steps. I said, one breath. Then another. My chest loosened. I said, this hurts. I said, but I'm alive. For now, that was enough. I knew I would fall again. I said, later. I didn't plan healing. I planned rest. I planned silence. I planned survival. I said, no revenge. I said, no forgiveness. I said, just endurance. The day waited. I stood up. I walked forward. I didn't look back. The pain followed. I let it. I whispered, stop hurting me. It didn't answer. I kept walking. I was still here. I reached my door again. I unlocked it. I stepped inside. I said, safe. The word felt thin. I sat down. I breathed. I waited. Nothing fixed itself. But nothing ended. I said, that's enough for today. The silence agreed. I lay back. I stared up. I said, I survived today. The sentence shook. I repeated it. I survived today. The pain stayed. But so did I. I closed my eyes again. I said nothing. I felt everything. Tomorrow could wait. Tonight was about staying alive. I breathed slowly. I counted. I didn't disappear. That was my victory tonight. I stayed. I endured. I survived the fall. And I kept breathing. That was enough. For now. Always. I sat on the floor and said, I'm done. The room didn't answer. I said, I can't keep doing this. My phone stayed silent. I thought I could disappear. I said, no one would notice. The thought scared me. I stood and said, get up. My legs shook. I said, just stand. I did. I looked at my reflection. I hate you, I said. My reflection didn't fight back. I said, you let this happen. I clenched my fists. I said, you stayed. The silence agreed. I sat again and whispered, I could ruin them. The idea felt heavy. I said, or I could ruin myself. Neither felt good. I pressed my palms together. I said, what do I do now? My phone buzzed. Lena said, open the door. I said, go away. She said, I won't. I opened the door. She said, you look worse. I feel worse, I replied. She stepped inside. She said, have you eaten? No, I said. She said, sit. I am sitting, I said. She said, you're fading. I want to, I said. She said, not allowed. I laughed weakly. She said, you don't get to vanish. I'm tired, I said. She said, rest later. I failed, I said. She said, you survived. That's not the same, I said. It's the start, she replied. I said, I think about hurting them. She said, that won't heal you. I think about destroying everything, I said. She said, including yourself. Yes, I said. She sat beside me. She said, look at me. I did. She said, you still exist. I said, barely. Barely is enough, she said. I said, I don't know who I am. She said, then rebuild. With what? I asked. With discipline, she said. That sounds boring, I said. It saves lives, she replied. I said, I don't feel strong. You don't need strength, she said. What do I need? I asked. Consistency, she said. I nodded slowly. She said, shower, eat, sleep. That's it. I asked. That's everything, she replied. She stood. She said, promise me. What? I asked. Don't quit, she said.
I won, I lied.
She looked at me. Try again, she said. I'll try, I said. After she left, I showered. I said, one step. I ate toast. I said, another step. I slept badly. I woke up anyway. I said, still here. My phone rang. Hello. I said, this is Marcus, he said. I froze. I heard about your situation, he said. I'm not at my best, I said. I'm not calling about sympathy, he said. Then why? I asked. I have an opening, he said. I laughed nervously. You remember my work. I asked. I remember your talent, he said. I failed before, I said. You were distracted, he replied. By my marriage, I said. By compromise, he said. I swallowed. I don't know if I can, I said. You won't know unless you try, he said. What if I fail again? I asked. Then you fail moving forward, he said. I was quiet. He said, this is yours, if you want it. I said, why now? Because you need purpose, he said. I closed my eyes. I saw Clara's smile. I saw Evan's hand. I said, I don't want revenge. Marcus said, good. I want control, I said. Then take the job, he said. My heart raced. I said, I'm scared. So was I, he replied. I took a breath. I said, okay. He said, say it clearly. I accept, I said. He smiled through his voice. Welcome back, he said. I ended the call. I sat still. I said, that was mine. No one took it. I stood straighter. I said, I choose power. The word felt new. I didn't smile. But I didn't break. I looked around the room. I said, this is where I start. The walls didn't argue. I picked up my phone again. I typed a message to Lena. I took the job, I wrote. She replied, I knew you would. I said, I didn't know. She wrote, you chose yourself. I set the phone down. I said, routine. I wrote a list. Wake up. Work. Eat. Sleep. Repeat. I said, no drama. I said, no chasing. I said, no begging. The list felt small. It felt possible. I sat on the bed. I said, this doesn't fix the pain. The pain answered anyway. I said, but it gives me direction. I stood by the window. The city moved below. I said, they don't see me. I said, that's fine. I checked the time. I said, tomorrow matters. For the first time, I believed it. I sat back down and said, I'm not healed, but I'm choosing to live. That choice felt heavy, real, and completely mine. For the first time did I woke up before the alarm and said, this is new. The mirror showed less damage. I said, not healed, but standing. At work, Marcus said, you're early. I don't like wasting time, I replied. He said, that's growth. I sat at my desk and breathed. A voice said, morning. I looked up. I'm Sophie, she said. I'm new, I replied. She smiled. You look serious. I'm focused, I said. She said, same thing sometimes. I nodded. Weeks passed like this. Coffee? She asked one day. I don't mix work and comfort, I said. She laughed. That sounds lonely. I'm used to it, I replied. She said, you don't have to be. I said nothing. At lunch, Marcus said, you heard about Evan? I said, no. He's bleeding money, Marcus said. I said, that's unfortunate. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I'm not celebrating, I said. He nodded. Later, Lena called. She's stuck, Lena said. Who? I asked. Clara, she replied. I said, how? Money. Dependence, Lena said. I exhaled slowly. I didn't plan this, I said. Life did, Lena replied. I ended the call. Sophie said, you look far away. I was, I said. She asked, bad memories? Old ones, I replied. She said, they fade. Some don't, I said. She said, you survive them. I looked at her. You talk like it matters, I said. It does, she replied. I felt something loosen. Days turned steady. I worked. I slept. I ate. I didn't check Clara's socials. I didn't ask questions. Marcus said, you're sharp again. I'm present, I said. Sophie said, you smile more. I'm practicing, I replied. She laughed. One evening, she said, walk with me. Where? I asked. Outside, she said. We stood in silence. She said, "You're guarded." "I had reasons," I replied. "Still do?" she asked. "Less," I said. She nodded. "Progress," she said. That night, my phone rang. Clara's name flashed. I stared. I answered. "Hello." I said. Her voice shook. "I need help." I closed my eyes. The past whispered. I met Clara at a quiet cafe and said, "You asked to talk." She said, "Thank you for coming." I said, "Say what you need." Her hand shook. She said, "You look different." "I am," I replied. She swallowed. "I'm sorry." I said, "Be specific." She said, "Evan cheated." I waited. "He left," she continued. I said, "When?" "During the pregnancy," she said. I nodded. She said, "I was alone." I said, "You chose alone." She flinched. She said, "I didn't think he would." I replied, "Neither did I." She whispered, "I was scared." I said, "So was I." She looked down. "He said the baby complicated things," she said. I said, "You said that to me first." Her eyes filled. She said, "I know." Silence sat between us. She said, "I need help." I said, "With what?" "Money," she said. "Support," she added. I leaned back. I said, "Why me?" She said, "You're good." I replied, "I'm done being useful." She whispered, "Please." I said, "No." She looked up fast. "You owe me," she said. I smiled once. "I owe myself," I replied. Her voice cracked. "I made a mistake," she said. I said, "You made a choice." She said, "I didn't know it would end like this." I replied, "Neither did I." Rachel walked in and froze. She said, "I didn't know he'd be here." I said, "I was leaving." She said, "Wait." Clara said, "Rachel, please." Rachel looked at me. She said, "I'm sorry." "For what?" I asked. "For not believing you," she said. I nodded. She said, "I thought you were exaggerating." I said, "I wasn't." She sighed. She said, "I see that now." Clara said, "Tell him." Rachel said, "She's struggling." I replied, "So did I." "She's pregnant," Rachel said. I said, "I lost a child too." Clara gasped. I stood. "I didn't come for this," I said. Clara reached out. "Don't leave," she said. I stepped back. "I already left," I replied. She said, "I loved you in my own way." I said, "That way destroyed me." She cried. "I'm scared," she said. I said, "Fear didn't stop you before." Rachel said, "You don't have to be cruel." I said, "I'm being honest." Clara said, "I can't do this alone." I said, "You chose not to do it with me." She sobbed. "I regret everything," she said. I said, "Regret isn't repair." She said, "I need you." I replied, "I need peace." She asked, "Is this revenge?" I said, "No." "Then why?" she asked. "Because saving you would destroy me," I said. Rachel whispered, "I'm sorry." I said, "Thank you for saying it." She nodded. Clara said, "Please stay." I shook my head. "I won't," I said. I walked toward the door. Behind me, Clara cried out. "I don't know how to do this," she said. I paused. "You'll figure it out," I said. I did. I opened the door. Rachel said, "Take care." "I am," I replied. Clara collapsed into her chair. Her sobs followed me. I didn't turn around. My steps were steady. Outside, I breathed. I said, "This is closure." The word felt true. I walked away. I sat across from Dr. Harris and said, "I feel guilty." He said, "For what?" "For walking away," I said. He nodded. "From Clara?" "Yes," I said. He asked, "Why?" "Because she's broken," I said. He replied, And you? I was broken first, I said. He leaned back. Do you think forgiveness is required for closure? He asked. I thought it was, I said. And now? I don't know, I admitted. He said, closure is about release, not reunion. I said, she cried. He said, so did you. I still hear it, I said. That doesn't mean you caused it, he replied. I rubbed my hands. I feel like I abandoned her, I said. He shook his head. You protected yourself, he said. That feels selfish, I replied. It's survival, he said. I went quiet. He said, you don't owe access to people who hurt you. I whispered, even if they regret it. Especially then, he said. I nodded slowly. Later, I sat alone at home. The apartment was silent. I said, this place remembers everything. No one answered. I opened a drawer. A folded paper waited. I forgot about this, I said. Baby names. I read them out loud. Emma, I said. Lucas, I whispered. My chest tightened. I never got to say goodbye, I said. I sat on the floor. I wanted you, I said. The room stayed quiet. I'm sorry, I said. Tears came without warning. I would have been enough, I said. The next morning, Sophie texted. Are you okay? She asked. I'm breathing, I replied. She said, want company? I don't want to talk, I said. That's fine, she replied. She showed up anyway. She said, I brought coffee. I said, you didn't have to. I wanted to, she said. We sat in silence. She said, you don't owe me words. Thank you, I said. She looked around. You're moving, she said. I think so, I replied. She nodded. Running? She asked. No, I said. Choosing. We watched the sunrise through the window. She said, it's quiet. I need quiet, I replied. She said, I'll miss you. I'll still exist, I said. She smiled. That's good, she said. After she left, I packed slowly. Each item felt lighter. I said, this isn't escape. The mirror didn't argue. I threw away the list of names. I remember you, I said. I always will. That night, I called Dr. Harris. I think I understand now, I said. He asked, understand what? That peace isn't revenge, I said. And? It's permission, I said. He replied, to move on. Yes, I said. I stood on the balcony. The city breathed below. I said, you didn't win. I said, you didn't lose. I said, you survived. The words stayed. I booked a one-way ticket. I said, new city. My phone buzzed. Sophie texted, good luck. I replied, thank you for being kind. She wrote, anytime. I lay in bed for the last time. I don't hate you, I said to the past. I just don't carry you anymore. The silence felt gentle. I woke before dawn. I packed the final bag. I said, this is my peace. The door closed behind me. The city stayed. I left. I woke up and said, this place feels clean. The room answered with silence. I said, I like that. My phone buzzed. Lena said, did you settle in? I did, I replied. She said, how does it feel? Quiet, I said. That suits you, she replied. I stood by the window. I said, I don't feel chased anymore. She said, good. I ended the call. At work, Marcus said, you're different. I said, I stopped pretending. He nodded. Sophie waved from her desk. Coffee? She asked. Sure, I said. She smiled. She said, you look lighter. I let things go, I replied. She said, I'm glad. Later, my phone rang again. It was Rachel. She said, I thought you should know. Know what? I asked. Clara and Evan are done, she said. I waited. He left again, she added. I said, I hope she's okay. Rachel paused. You really changed, she said. I survived, I replied. She said, I'm sorry for everything. Thank you, I said. I hung up. I expected something. Relief. Anger. Satisfaction. I felt none of it. I said, it doesn't matter. The words felt honest. That night, I cooked dinner alone. I said, this is enough. No one argued. I ate slowly. I listened to my breathing. I said, I'm here. I sat on the couch and spoke out loud. You were betrayed, I said. You were broken, I continued. But you weren't erased, I said. The room stayed still. I said, you didn't fail as a man. I paused. You trusted, I said. That mattered, I added. I remembered the nights I begged. I said, never again. I remembered the silence. I said, I feel it now. The next morning, Sophie said, you're smiling. I noticed, I replied. She said, that's new. I earned it, I said. She laughed softly. At lunch, Marcus said, you're leading this project. Me? I asked. You're steady, he said. I can do it, I replied. I know, he said. That evening, I walked home alone. I said, I don't need witnesses. The streetlights flickered. I said, I don't need approval. My steps felt sure. I called Dr. Harris. I'm okay, I said. He replied, that sounds earned. I didn't get revenge, I said. You got peace, he replied. Yes, I said. I ended the call and laughed quietly. I made it, I said. Days passed. I woke. I worked. I rested. I didn't check the past. I didn't explain myself. One night, I stood on my balcony. The city lights blinked below. I said, you tried to break me. I said, you failed. The words stayed strong. I thought about the man I was. I said, you endured. I thought about the man I am. I said, you chose yourself. My phone buzzed again. Lena texted, proud of you. I replied, I am too. I lay in bed and spoke to the dark. I wasn't a mistake, I said. My love wasn't weak, I added. My survival is proof, I finished. I closed my eyes. The silence felt safe. In the morning, I packed nothing. I stayed. I said, this is home now. I stood alone in the center of the room. I said, I lost people. I said, I lost dreams. I said, but I kept myself. My chest felt steady. My hands didn't shake. I whispered, I survived. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. I opened the window. Fresh air filled the room. I breathed it in. I said, this is my victory.